Om Stavakaya Dharmasya Sarvadharmasvarupine Avadaravarishthaya Ramakrishna Te Namaha. Asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma mritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let us offer our salutations to Sri Ramakrishna, the embodiment of all religions, the Supreme God Incarnate who came to establish religion universal. Let us pray to Him to lead us from the unreal to the real, to lead us from the darkness of ignorance to the light of knowledge, to lead us from death to immortality. Recently we have observed Shankaracharya's birthday. Today I am speaking on the topic Acharya Shankar, the world teacher. There are so many teachers in the world, but there are some characteristics whom we call the teachers of the world. One of the most important characteristics is that the world teacher should be illumined one. Then only he can convey the divine wisdom to the whole humanity. Secondly, he must be full of compassion. His love should encompass the whole humanity. That is the second characteristic of the world teacher. And thirdly, it should be very convincing and without any barriers, restrictions of any kind. Shankaracharya fulfilled all these characteristics. He taught what he had experienced in his life. He saw the whole universe is nothing but Brahman. He did experience that. He was overwhelmed by that realization that he wanted to give that nectar of wisdom to the whole humanity. Sri Ramakrishna also had the same experience of seeing God in everything. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, the world viewed as God is real, the world without God is unreal. There is great significance in this statement. Shankaracharya was the son of knowledge, S-U-N, son. And also he was compassion incarnate. He was full of compassion. Shankaracharya could see people hugging misery, mistaking it for pleasure. He saw people mistaking the ephemeral for the eternal and suffering endlessly. Ignorance was responsible, and the light of reason was the only way out of the darkness. That's why the famous Brihadaranyaka Upanishad emphatically declares, light the lamp of knowledge to dispel the darkness of ignorance. As long as you consider this world is everything, here we have come to enjoy the world and die in it, is totally absurd, and it is the height of ignorance. So only the knowledge, the awareness that the whole thing is filled with God consciousness, that is the lamp of knowledge. So, by example and precept, Shankaracharya exhorted people to sharpen the sword of knowledge, to cut asunder the veil of ignorance and emerge into the realm of abiding joy and peace, which is their birthright. We are truly divine and effulgent. But because, for whatever reason, we have become unaware of this fact, so we are suffering and suffering. Suffering continues until and unless you look within and realize the Atma Jyoti, the effulgent light, ever burning, bright inside the heart. The supreme psychologist that he was, Shankaracharya knew that man grows into reason via emotion. Hence he cautioned people against a straight flight to reason. Emotional maturity is essential. That is, jnana through bhakti. Use the emotional faculty to get awakened. Upasana and service at the feet of the Guru are the necessary initial steps which would help develop moral virtues and strengthen reason. One should undoubtedly establish oneself in thorough moral character. Without developing moral virtues, you can never expect any experience in spiritual life. So, it is very important, whatever may be the difficulties, situations, we must make breakthrough. We must get over all these dirty weaknesses occupying our mind, troubling all the time in one way or the other. Lord Krishna says in the Daivi Sampad Vibhaga Yoga, the qualities of the divine and the qualities of the asuras, he clearly demarcates. So we should undoubtedly develop all these divine qualities such as love, compassion, friendliness. Very important. This is the basis for spiritual life. If you don't develop these qualities, your spiritual life has no foundation and you will be frustrated So, please note all these points when you are seeking the path of knowledge. You must equip yourself properly. You must become qualified enough in every manner. Then you will really enjoy the experience immensely. Shankaracharya knew that human temperaments vary, and these decide the natural choice of their favorite deity, what we call Ishtadevata. Hence, in everyone's Ishtadevata, Shankara saw the supreme deity. Lord Krishna himself again tells in the Gita, whoever in whatsoever form worships any form, he is worshipping me alone. I inspire them with faith and devotion in the deity whom the person is worshipping. These are the words of assurance by Lord Krishna. And Lord Krishna says, whatever form you worship, it's perfectly all right. They're all my own forms. Finished. It's like a person wearing various dresses. Every day one dress. All the dresses belong to him. Same way, God has many infinite forms, many forms. In order to suit the temperament of the people, God assumes various forms. Let there not be any conflict. People simply get confused about the various forms of gods and goddesses. Why should you get confused? It only shows that you are not open to reason. If you are open to reason, you perfectly accept it. It is a law, unity and diversity. The whole universe looks so beautiful because of its diversity. There is no monotony. Everything is full of beauty. That beauty is because the diversity. You enjoy the diverse ways of the play of the Divine Supreme. So Shankaracharya, in order to satisfy all the different temperaments, composed many devotional hymns which will help people to rise from the emotional plane to the plane of reason and thence to liberation. So, out of his infinite compassion, Shankaracharya has given all these most wonderful hymns, stotras. Shankaracharya has written commentaries on the Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita and Brahma Sutras. These three form Prasthana Traya. And Shankaracharya has written commentary for all these three. He follows in letter and spirit the command of Gita Acharya, Shri Krishna. Should never disturb the faith of the ignorant, but that he himself should go to the level of the seeker and give him an upward push. That is the teaching of Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna says, one should not disturb the faith of anyone. In what way you can help? You help him from the level where he stands. That's the beauty of Sri Krishna's message. And Shankaracharya followed it explicitly. It was this understanding that the Acharya brought under the wide umbrella of Advaita Vedanta more than 70 warring religious sects of his time, each preaching exclusive salvation of its own brand. Shankaracharya had Brahmagyan, he could have been well satisfied with the bliss of his experience. But he wanted to share that nectar of wisdom to the whole humanity. So, out of his compassion, he wrote commentaries and made us understand the importance of studying, understanding scriptures in a proper way. As in the case of Swami Vivekananda of modern times, acceptance was his motto, never condemnation. All places of worship will be naturally acceptable to any true follower of Shankara. This breadth of vision, who else but a compassionate Acharya can bestow on his followers? No one can lay exclusive claim on Shankara, for like Uncle Moon, he is the common property of all. So he is the Jagat Guru, the teacher of everyone who seeks spirituality. Here is the Guru. To him there is no north or south, east or west. All world is his kin. When Shankaracharya returned home after his studies, he was full of the spirit of renunciation. From his deep and thoughtful study of the Upanishads, he had come to the conclusion that the end of human life was to realize Brahman, the supreme reality, the one without a second. This passion for renunciation became more and more pronounced as days passed. The only consideration that stood in the way was the thought of his widowed mother, who would be alone and helpless if he left her. Finally, he got her consent for sannyas. He assured her that he would be by her side during her last moments and discharge the religious duties of a son by performing all the necessary rites. The mother was left to the care of the relatives to whom Shankara handed over his ancestral property. Later, he was teaching his disciples in the hermitage. Suddenly, he had a premonition of his mother's impending death. So he told the disciples to continue the studies. He will come after a while. So by his yogic power, he went to Kaladi, the mother's place, and he was there at the last moments of his mother's passing away. So she was overwhelmed with joy to learn that her son had come as he promised. It is said Shankara at first spoke to her of the ultimate reality, the Nirguna Brahman, and the oneness of the Atman and Brahman, the high Advaita philosophy. He began to say to her. The mother confessed that the teachings were too high and subtle for her. She could not really grasp what exactly Shankaracharya meant. Shankaracharya was very sharp and shrewd. He grasped the situation at once, and like the true master, came to her level. He then composed a moving hymn graphically describing the glorious form of Vishnu, listening to which the mother felt intense and ecstatic happiness. She was joyful when she passed away in that mood. In the words of the Gita, she had the blessed destiny of a yogi who departs with concentrated mind, full of devotion to the Lord. Shankara performed all the rites enjoined by the Shastras. Though the sannyasini is not bound by any such obligations and is even forbidden to do them, the extraordinary filial piety and affection got the better of all such conventional rules. Shankara went by the spirit of the laws as he knew well their purpose, scope and limitations. Shankaracharya carried out into practice the teaching of the Shruti that the mother should be revered and honored as God. Matur Devo Bhava, it is declared in the Upanishad. The famous saying of Shankara about the unsurpassed unselfishness and pure love of the mother reverberates through the ages. He says, Kuputro jayate kvachidepi kumata na bhavati. There may be many bad sons, but not one single bad mother. But now we are finding even bad mother also. But that is very extraordinary. So mother occupies a very important position in the drama of life. Shankaracharya had composed Kanakadhara Stavam, the hymn on the rain of gold. It's an act of mercy. It happened when he had to beg his food according to the rules of Brahmacharya. One day he went to a house and he asked for bhiksha. The husband had gone out, very poor family. They didn't have anything in the home. And the lady of the home was very sad that the brahmachari should go without taking any bhiksha from her house. Well then, Shankaracharya told her in a very affectionate way, Mother, please see, there must be something in the homes in some corner. Please see, whatever it is there, please bring it to me. I am satisfied with that. Then she went back again and searched the whole house. She could find one amalaki. And she brought with great hesitation. There was nothing in the home. And she dropped the amalaki into the bowl of Shankaracharya. Shankaracharya was moved by the utter purity and love of that mother. Immediately he composed Kanakadhara Stotram, the famous verse praising Goddess Lakshmi, invoking Goddess Lakshmi. Person of Shankaracharya's stature, seeking the blessings of Goddess Lakshmi, instantly there was pouring of gold amalakis. The whole house was full of golden amalakis. The lady was so overwhelmed She lost all her outward consciousness. She was in blissful state for a long time. So, every stotra that he composed has got a background and a purpose. And if you read that hymn and understand the sublime meaning, you will be overjoyed how Shankara was great in giving those hymns to all of us. Once Acharya came to a place where Kapalikas were having their sway. There are some group of people who practiced some kind of religious practice. The Kapalika chief, his name was Ugra Bhairava. He could not defeat Shankaracharya in arguments. So he decided to do away with him by cunning. So one day Shankaracharya was alone. This Ugra Bhairava approached him seeking discipleship. Shankaracharya did not refuse. He accepted. Ugra Bhairava soon won the confidence of all by his conduct. He fell prostrate at the feet of the Acharya one day and he began to weep intensely. Acharya was, as I said earlier, was full of compassion incarnate. He was jnana full outwardly, but inwardly he is full of mercy and compassion, full of love. So jnana and prema blended in a very perfect way. That is the personality of Shankaracharya. So he was moved by the tears of this Ugra Bhairava, and I asked him, why are you weeping? Speak out, don't have any fear. And it was the Guru's commitment to remove the sorrow of one who had taken refuge in him. Ugra Bhairava said, Master, I have been worshipping Lord Shiva for several years with a deep desire that I should live in Kailas with my physical body. I have been blessed with the boon that if I offer as sacrifice the head of an all-knowing one or a king, my desire will be fulfilled. I have no doubt, Master, you are a Sarvajna, all-knower. Not only that, you are also merciful. See what kind of disciple. He is asking the head of his own teacher, spiritual teacher. Shankaracharya then said without least hesitation, let it be so. He didn't care for his body. Let him take this body if it is useful to him. But then he warned him, look, if my disciples come to know of your plan, it would go awry. Have you any means of carrying out your plan without the knowledge of my disciples? Then Ugra Bhairava said, Sir, there is a place of worship for Bhairava in the nearby thick forest. There I shall make all arrangements for the worship and the sacrificial offering of the head. If you would come there at midnight on the next new moon day, there won't be any obstacle. I shall meet you midway and escort you there. Acharya agreed. because he had no fear of death. He knew well there is no death for the Atman. Atman is eternal, imperishable. Imperishable. Nainam chindanti shastrani, nainam dahati pavakaha, nachenam kleriyantyapo, nashoshayati marutaha. As Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, this Atman cannot be cut by sword, cannot be wet by water, cannot be burnt by fire, cannot be blown away by wind. It is imperishable. And Shankaracharya had realized the truth. So there is no fear at all. There is one sign of realization. A person who has realized the truth is totally fearless. Abhayam sattva samshuddhihi, Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. Totally fearless. So mind is well established in sattva guna, sattvic state. The appointed hour was drawing near. The disciples were fast asleep. And the Acharya quietly got up and walked towards the forest. Because he had given the word that he would go himself. So he went. Ugra Bhairava was beside himself with joy when he saw the Acharya walking towards him. After prostrating at the feet of the Acharya, he led him to the heart of the forest. A dim light lit before the Kala Bhairava Murti only served to accentuate the darkness around. In front of the deity of awesome form, the altar was ready, and a few trident-bearing Kapalikas were ready at hand to do the bidding of Ugra Bhairava. With folded palm, Ugra Bhairava addressed the Acharya. Master, kindly place your head on this altar, and I shall offer the sacrifice for doing which I have been waiting for all these years. Then the Acharya said, well, let me first offer my worship to Mahadeva, then you may carry out your wish. So he went into meditation. Time seemed to stand still. Even as the glistening hatchet of Ugra Bhairava rose high to come down, there was a paralyzing roar of a lion, and Ugra Bhairava lay dead on the ground. How that could happen? Padmapada, one of the beloved disciples of the Shankaracharya, whose favorite deity was Ugra Narasimha Murti, the Lord incarnation of Narasimha, who had dramatically materialized on the scene. Somehow he came there, the compassionate Acharya. When he came out of the Samadhi after meditation, he realized that the time for his departure from the world had not yet come. He had pity for Ugra Bhairava, who had now learned the lesson that the body was not to be identified with Atman. In a celebrated Brahmasutra Bhashya, Acharya cites the examples of Dharmavyadha, Vidura and others who were born with the knowledge of Brahman acquired in previous births. They were all Brahmagyanis. He mentions that the effects cannot be prevented from working on account of their present birth. Acharya has stated that the knowledge that arises out of the study of the Vedas could also be had through the Puranas and the Itihasas, which were not esoteric texts but readily within the reach of all. It is an evidence of his compassion that in addition to his commentaries on the major Upanishads and the Brahma Sutras, he wrote 3 commentaries on works drawn from the Itihasa text Mahabharata, commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita, Vishnu Sahasranama, and Sanas Sujatiya. He has interpreted the sacred scriptures liberally to underscore that the knowledge of Brahman is open to all. It is not reserved only to a selected few. He boldly declared, "It has been established that everyone has the right to the knowledge of Brahman, and that the supreme goal is attained by the knowledge alone. Sarveshancha adhikaro vidyayancha shreyaha kevalaya vidyaya veti siddham." If we keep in mind the state of society during great Acharya's time and the orthodox traditions and associations of his early years, we can't but marvel at the great spirit of love and compassion the Acharya had for everyone. He was eager to make available the redeeming wisdom of our scriptures to the people of this sacred land, who were at one time in danger of losing its value. He is referring to the society in India. Though the Acharya himself was a Brahmagyani, he often placed himself in the position of suffering people caught in the thraldom of old age, disease, and penury. He composed divine hymns for them to pour out their heart's agony to the Lord, such as Devi Aparadha Kshamapana Stotra. In Puri, when the devotees did not know where to look for the missing Murti of Jagannath, Acharya Shankara praised the Lord Jagannatha with the stotra, Jagannatha Swami Nayana Patagami Me. It's a beautiful stotra, Jagannatha Stava, composed by Shankara. And Shankara had a divine vision of where to look for the Murti, which he discovered, and he installed in the temple to the great delight of the people and the ruler of the land. So if one studies the works of Shankaracharya, instances of his compassion can be found strewn throughout. Shankaracharya is one of the greatest of self-realized souls and philosophers this world of ours has produced. Leaving home in a spirit of renunciation and aspiration to realize reality at the tender age of 80 years, he completed an unbelievable mission in the span of just a few years, passing away in his 32nd year. During that period, he did what is known as Digvijaya, conquest of the quarters, carrying the banner of Advaita Vedanta, the supreme philosophy of absolute monism, into the 4 corners of India, and overcoming all lesser schools of philosophy through his convincing, irrefutable arguments. His incredible work remains dynamically living, active and ever progressive even to this day. More than 1200 years after he propounded his doctrine. The quintessence of Advaita Vedanta is to affirm the truth and reality of our essential, eternal, divine identity, and to resolutely reject the error of thinking of ourselves as a finite human creature, having a name and form, beginning and end, and subject to changes such as birth, death, old age, disease, decay, pain, sorrow, suffering, etc. Resolutely rejecting this error and simultaneously affirming our eternal, unchangeable divine identity is the center of Advaita Vedanta sadhana. They call it affirming and rejecting, Pushtikarana and Nirakarana. Affirmation and Neti Neti, Nirakarana. Shankara's most popular work, Viveka-Chudamani, is a call to discrimination between the self and the non-self. Atma, Anatma, Viveka. Atman is Sat, existence absolute. Anatman is appearance only, temporary in time, limited in space, perishable. It is Kshara. Purusha is imperishable. Atman is Akshara. He is Akshara Purusha. Imperishable being. Ajo nityaha shashvatoyam purano na hanyate hanyamane sharire. Unborn, eternal, changeless and ancient. The self is not killed when the body is killed. Thus the Viveka-Chudamani is a discourse, a treatise and a sadhana on discrimination between the self and the non-self. And the second work of his, Atma Bodha, is a light upon what the self is. As you discriminate between the self and the non-self, you get a good knowledge of what the non-self is, so you can reject it. You will not be deluded by it. You can free yourself from the veil of delusion by knowing the nature of an Atman. And then, to be rooted in the reality, to be fixed in it firmly, to be able to think, reflect, and meditate upon it, and to awaken the correct awareness within your consciousness, a thorough study of what the self is, of great importance and value. To that end, Atma Bodha can be the way that God can gradually answer your prayer. Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya and Thiyo Yona Prachodayat. From darkness lead me unto light, and may He illumine our intellects. To avoid that which is wrong, we have to get a knowledge of what wrong is. And to pursue and practice that which is right, we have the need to have a knowledge and a grasp of what right is, of what reality and truth is. Thus both the negative and positive aspects of Vedantic admonition are of equal importance in making the mind aware of its error and to make the intellect grasp the truth. When Brahman is the reality to be attained, why unnecessarily know about the world, prapancha or samsara? The answer is that because we want to free ourselves from the delusion of the world, we must know the tricks of this deluding appearance. Indeed, we must know everything about it because it comes in numerous subtle ways. We think the world is outside us, but by and large the world or prapancha or samsara is within us. We have to understand that. What is it within us that makes us regard prapancha to be real and makes us move towards it, get attached to it, get bound by it? What is it within us that has to be rooted out, eradicated first? Thus the study of the avidya or maya within us is the key to freeing ourselves from delusion and rising from darkness to light. Shankara again and again reiterated, you are immortal soul, you are not this body, nor this mind. They are upadhis, limiting adjuncts temporarily added on to you. They are there as part of your lesser personality, your earth consciousness. But you are also there far beyond them, transcending them, a divine personality, a supra-human spiritual reality, untouched by time and space, not bothered by pain, sorrow and suffering. This then is to be heard, reflected upon and meditated upon. Shravan, Manan and Nididhyasan are to be done. Direct all your attention to the practice of this truth, which shall make you free For it is this truth that arouses in us our kinship with the eternal, universal reality, Paramatma. Constantly, you have to reject the attempts of the mind and its age-old, inveterate tendencies to keep itself tied down to a lower level of ignorance and mistaken identity. It should be given no quarter. By the strength of your willpower, your positive awakened consciousness, and your resolute determined sankalpa to attain realization in this very body, you must keep this process up. You must shine with an effulgent inner awareness of your own essential, immortal and imperishable divine identity. Your interior should be a mass of effulgence, of jnana prakasha. There should be a state of jnana bodha within, a state of wakefulness within, no slumber. For this you must pray, and for this you must practice. You must lift up your consciousness from the present, ordinary, humdrum human level of earth consciousness into a lofty, sublime, higher spiritual level of a divine spiritual consciousness. The same idea is given by Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. Uddhared atmanatmanam atmanam avasadayet. You have to uplift yourself, inspiring devotees, spiritual seekers. One of the most important compositions is Bhajagovindam. Shankaracharya compared this Bhajagovindam, his most wonderful hymn conveying the greatest philosophy. Bhajagovindam along with Atmabodha come under the category of Prakarana Granthas, introductory manuals for spiritual studies. Not that you suddenly jump to Upanishads. Oh, I read all the Upanishads. Without having preliminary understanding, you will not be able to grasp the subtle meaning of the Upanishads. So these are like primers, explaining the philosophical terms for the spiritual initiates. The elementary spiritual truths are brought to the fore in these booklets, and man may think, oh this is life. I must seek escape from this prison hole, and may God guide and help me. Man is thus drawn out of miry bylanes of life, in which he is stuck up and put on to the royal road of spirituality on the pathway to God. There is a story how this Bhajagovindam was composed. It is said that once in Benares, Shankaracharya, together with his 14 disciples, was going along on his daily rounds. There he saw a very old Pandit cramming Panini's grammar rules. Shankara was touched with pity at the ignorance and the folly of the man to be wasting away the most precious dusk hours of his life for a mere intellectual accomplishment, instead of spending them in contemplation on the Lord, praying for spiritual enlightenment and for release from the bondage of samsara. He knew that this was not the state of that particular old man only, but was the general state of most of the people. Men waste and while away their lives in many futile ways, groveling in the mire of earthly attachments, forgetting God, who is the only goal in life. In comparison for man's plight, he burst forth into these stanzas, famous as Moha Mudgara. In every stanza there is a refrain, Bhajagovindam. So It is well known as Bhajagovindam. So he tells there, these grammar rules, meaning all this secular learning will not come to your rescue when death knocks to snatch you away. Instead of wasting away the precious span of your life in a futile manner, turn to and seek Govinda, who alone can save you from the jaws of life and death. Devote your time to spiritual practices. Death may come any time. So, in 31 simple, sweet and lucid slokas, giving homely analogies and illustrations for our easy understanding, Shankaracharya tells us about the fallacy and futility of our life. And shloka by shloka he removes veil after veil, dispelling our ignorance, illusions and delusions, and showing us where the remedy for all our misery lies. So the poem is called Moha Mudgara. It touches all aspects of our life. How these blind and bind us, plunging us deeper and deeper into the abyss of ignorance and misery. He wants each one of us to cultivate a discerning and discriminating eye, Viveka, to distinguish the permanent from the transitory, the real from the unreal, to practice Vairagya for worldly attractions and distractions, to cultivate devotion for realizing the Lord Supreme, the abiding truth, and thus getting released from the misery and bondage of this phenomenal existence. So, Lord Shankara has composed this Bhajagovindam Stotra. It's really most inspiring hymn it is. As I said earlier, Shankaracharya wrote bhashyas or commentaries on the Brahma Sutras, Upanishads and the Gita. The bhashya on the Brahma Sutra is called Sharirik Bhashya. Shankara wrote commentaries on Sanat Sujatiya and Sahasranama Adhyaya. For learning logic and metaphysics, go to Shankara's commentaries. For gaining practical knowledge which unfolds and strengthens devotion, go to his works such as Vivek Chudamani, Atma Bodha, Aprokshanubhuti, Anandalahari, Atma Anatma Viveka, Drisya Viveka, and Upadesha Sahasri. Shankara wrote innumerable original works in verses which are matchless in sweetness, melody, and thought. Shankara's supreme Brahman is Nirgun, without the gunas, Nirakar, formless, Nirvishesha, without attributes, and Akarta, non-agent. He is above all needs and desires. Shankara says, this Atman is self-evident. This Atman or self is not established by proofs of the existence of the self. It is not possible to deny this Atman, for it is the very essence of he who denies it. The Atman is the basis of all kinds of knowledge. The self is within, the self is without. Self means Atman, not the mind. The self is before and the self is behind. The self is on the right hand, the self is on the left. The self is above and the self is below. That means the self is all pervading. Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, Anandam. They are not separate attributes. They form the very essence of Brahman. Brahman cannot be described because description implies distinction. Brahman cannot be distinguished from any other than he. The objective world, the world of names and forms, has no independent existence. The Atman alone has real existence. The world is only Vyavaharika or phenomenal. Shankara was the exponent of the Kevala Advaita philosophy. His teachings can be summed up Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. Jiva Brahmaiva Naparaha. Brahman alone is real. This world is unreal. The Jiva is identical with Brahman. Shankara preached Nivartavada. Just as the snake is superimposed on the rope, this world and this body are superimposed on Brahman, or the Supreme Self. If you get a knowledge of the rope, the illusion of the snake will vanish. Even so, if you get a knowledge of Brahman, the illusion of the body and the world will vanish. Shankara is the foremost among the masterminds and giant souls which Mother India has produced. He was the expounder of the Advaita philosophy. He was a great metaphysician, a practical philosopher, an infallible logician, a dynamic personality, and a stupendous moral and spiritual force. His grasping and elucidating powers knew no bounds. He was a fully developed yogi, jnani, and bhakta. He was a karma yogin of no mean order. He was a powerful magnet. There is not one branch of knowledge which Shankara has left unexplored, and which has not received the touch, polish and finish of his superhuman intellect. For Shankara and his works, we have a very high reverence. The loftiness, calmness and firmness of his mind, the impartiality with which he deals with various questions, his clearness of expression, all these make us revere the philosopher more and more. His teachings will continue to live as long as the sun shines. Shankara's scholarly erudition and his masterly way of exposition of intricate philosophical problems have won the admiration of all the philosophical schools of the world at the present moment. Shankara was an intellectual genius, a profound philosopher, an able propagandist, a matchless preacher, a gifted poet, and a great religious reformer. Perhaps never in the history of any literature a stupendous writer like him has been found. Even the Western scholars of the present day pay their homage and respects to him. Of all the ancient systems, that of Shankaracharya will be found to be the most congenial and the most easy of acceptance to the modern mind. So, particularly people of modern times, they want scientific approach. They want to reason out everything. And here, Shankara gives the presentation of all our scriptures in a very thorough exposition, full of reasoning and analytical approach, how one should realize one's own reality. Realizing Brahman is the goal of every individual being on this earth. Jivan Mukti. Shankaracharya wanted to realize the truth in this very life, in this mortal life. Sri Ramakrishna had also this experience, seeing God in his mortal frame. So, let us try to concentrate on the works of Shankaracharya. His great life and great teachings are ever inspiring to all the sincere spiritual seekers of the world. Thank you very much. We have a special program coming up on July 21st, Thursday, Shri Guru Purnima, 6:30 p.m., bhajan, brief talk and special worship, then flower offering. On Sunday, July 24th, we have temple site program. Morning 11 o'clock, chantings, brief talk. All are welcome to attend these programs. And Another important event is coming up in the month of August, first Sunday to succeeding Sunday, August 7th to August 14th. We have children camp in Ganges, Vivekananda Monastery. So the camp is for children between the ages of 7 and 14. So details you can contact the office. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. May the Lord protect us, may He nourish us, may our knowledge be fruitful and enlightened, may we not hate each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.